Great. So I'll go ahead and call the April 27th Whatcom County PUD Commission meeting to order. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
So first, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I guess I'll take it this morning.
Oh,
Mike, good. You want to do it, Christine?
I'll do it. I haven't
Great.
done it in a while.
Great.
Okay.
Please do so. Yeah.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Christine. Well, let's go over the agenda. Let me check in here first with Steve. Are we adding an agenda item here regarding the rejection under new business? Or is that 5D? You're muted,
5D.
Steve. Yeah, okay. So thank you. So that's already on the agenda, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, Ann.
Correct.
Are there any other items to introduce or adjust in the agenda? Commissioners, staff? Commissioner Murphy?
Yeah, thank you all too. Under old business, when we talk about the general manager appointment process update, will we also, as commissioners, have the time to ask some questions? Because I have some questions I'd like to ask. So are we going to be able to go into some dialogue there and talk about things?
I'd be very much in favor of that. I want to make sure there's nothing on the agenda that needs to occur at a particular time, correct? So we will take as much time as needed on the individual agenda item.
Understand, thank you.
And it looks like we don't have an executive session planned today either. So because for me, the constraint is 1 p.m. Steve and I have a meeting, so. But hopefully not needing that much time.
I have no time constraints today.
Great. So with that, let's go ahead and proceed with the agenda. Do we need a motion if we're not changing the agenda, John?
No.
Yeah. Let's proceed with the agenda then. So first, let's move on to the consent agenda, the meeting minutes, and the approval of claims.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as it reads.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. So let's move on to old business. And the item that we have under old business is the general manager appointment process update. And I think John is going to lead this item on the agenda. Is that correct?
Certainly I can. So commissioners, I sent out an email yesterday morning, just trying to make sure there's clarity on the process. After last commission meeting, you asked that I set up some interviews with potential firms. And as I was thinking about that, I had a concern about an interview because your commission meeting those interviews as a group, which was what you wanted, would be an open public session. And I felt some applicants might be reluctant to have an interview, fully vet their process, their concepts that might be their business ideas, and fully in public. And I know these consultants sometimes will have a program that they do a surface description of how they do things, but getting into depth, they may or may not consider that to be a business strategy that they don't want to disclose in the public session. And so I left messages or spoke with each commissioner individually saying, how do we want to approach this? Some feedback I received was maybe more of a meet and greet session. We have such short time sometimes between commission meetings, those weren't set up. And then we had the report from Steve on his discussion with one firm representative. And then we also saw what the Whatcom PUD simple publication being managed for a job posting that's being managed by their council. So I just thought I'd bring it back up without too much time delay to make sure we're all on the same page and the commission is all on the same page. So I know with clarity the direction that I'm going and how we're going to bring this forward. I think part of the discussion that I understood from Steve was, and this is natural in organizational leadership transition, is that the outgoing leader may step back so that as you go through a search, the new leader can come in and have their own relationship with the commission and less influence from the prior operational leadership. And so that new leader can come in and establish his own or her own way of doing things and things. So, and that's not a reflection on Steve, and we've had extensive discussions about that. So I did an email that I thought that what I understood the tasks to go forward with. And I think in that, in reading the notes from Steve's discussion with the one firm, my own experiences, thinking back on your discussions, early in this process will be a necessity for you, I think, as the commission to have not clarity as to what your strategic vision is and how that works with the operational capacity of the district, so that you can inform what you are looking for in the next leader who will take you through the next period of time. I say that because you had a lot of discussions about what you may want to do and whether operationally you're able to achieve all those things, and whether that's realistic or not, is you will make that decision, and how you might engage in those, from funding to staffing to structural to culture to priorities, action plans, and all the rest. That really comes back to that strategic plan that the prior commissions have adopted. There's been an urge for you to look at and revisit. My recommendation to you again is that you go back and in this process, as you identify what you're looking for in a new general manager, you revisit your strategic plan. You look at that from a business implementation perspective, and I mean that's budgetary perspective, financial plan associated with that strategic plan, and that'll inform you then what you're going to look for in the GM. I think we can modify or develop a job description with the firm that you're kind of doing this maybe dual with the firm that you select to help guide you through some of this process, or I guide you through that process, but you're ultimately leading to a final job description, a salary range that search firm will then pursue on your behalf with your based on your direction and decision. So I thought from the way I approach things, just here's the task and here's what we're going to try to accomplish and go through. So I thought I'd put those out in that email that came in yesterday morning to you. So Commissioner Deshmani, as my lead off, that was my description.
Okay, well,
to kind of
let's
guide the discussion and the tasks that I saw coming forth.
great. And the other report that might be helpful before we get into a structured discussion, because obviously we need to make some material progress. We need to make put some structure around all of this. But if I could ask Steve for you to present on the subject of the conversation that you had with one of the placement firms as well, briefly, as you think is appropriate. And then let's have a conversation about how we're going to structure the next few steps here.
The Commissioner, thank you. I reached out to another firm, and that firm actually was, I think, both Commissioner Grant and Commissioner Deshmani, you had recommended that I contact that other firm. That other firm has extensive experience. In fact, I think all they do is work on placement for executives or high level management positions in the electric utility industry, mostly public agencies, although they do, I think, some work with private utilities and co-ops and other agencies like that. My discussion with that firm really was around what that firm thinks the commission should be doing in terms of really reiterating what John just talked about, and that is take a look at what you really want in a new general manager. Because based upon what that individual that I talked to at that firm had some discussion, I think lengthy discussion with Commissioner Deshmani about some of the things that were listed in our strategic plan and some of the interests that Commissioner Deshmani and Commissioner Grant especially have brought to the forefront in the last few months as to what they think, what you all think looks to be the vision for the district over the next several years, and what type of leader, what type of general manager you would really need or look to help you take the district to reach those goals. And based upon that discussion, that individual recommended that the commission consider actually bringing in an interim general manager and help have that interim general manager actually help the commission set that vision, if you would. And I think the term that he used was put some reality on what type of individual, what kind of experience you would be looking for in that new general manager, and put some sort of a reality check on what, not so much what it would cost the district to hire that individual as general manager, the new permanent general manager, but also really talk about the cost of staffing up and the cost of developing some of the projects and plans and ideas that you have talked about. So, and based upon that discussion that I had with that person from that firm, he highly suggested that you take that interim step. Now, saying that, he also indicated that he thought that the commission could certainly move ahead and start the process now, to choose the permanent general manager, but that the commission really needs to step back and, as John said earlier, really take a look at, what your vision for the district is for the next, several years. So.
Thank you, Steve. If I may, let me attempt to start putting some structure to our discussion. And I'm just doing this to be facilitative. And I'm just want to make sure that staff, as well as, we're all discussing this, and I'm just trying to put some structure around it. So this idea of bringing in an interim is a new idea. It is not something we discussed at our last commission meeting. It's could significantly impact the rough outline and flow that we described and our commission consensed on in our last commission meeting, which was that we would rely on John and other staff to support the process of interviewing, or maybe not necessarily explicitly interviewing, but conversations with placement firms so that the commission could make a decision on which placement firm to use. And that the outputs of that placement firm's services would be to identify the job description and other attributes of a future general manager. We also discussed in our previous meeting the need for revisiting the strategic plan. That was I believe, a concurrent task that we would obviously work closely with our current GM to do. Am I correct in what I just stated? I'm just looking for some consensus here from the commission.
That sounds like an accurate recap of what I have been processing over the last few weeks too, Atul.
Mike, is that your understanding as well? Am I
I,
missing something? Please correct me if I'm missing something.
I can't say you're missing something, O'Toole, but I guess I'm not understanding exactly what possibly, maybe if I could say you and Christine are looking for in a general manager. I really need to understand better from the two of you. What do you envision of what our past has been like, our present, and where do you want to go in the future? Because it's hard to support and work together as a team, you know, when things are being put out there that, you know, the only way I can make a good decision is if I get all the information and I have the opportunity to decide, and then I can give you a straight answer. But I feel like I'm lacking on some of the information here. So it is a little confusing for me.
Go ahead, Commissioner Grant.
I mean, I am just going to agree with you, Mike, that I think that we still have a lot of work to do as a commission to define. And for me, I think a big part of it is outcomes. How will we know if the GM is successful in 18 months, in 36 months? And, you know, I think all of us still need to do the work individually to identify those things and then come together and create a cohesive vision around that. And I think that that's, and Atul, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's, I think part of why we're going to be needing to do this sort of in parallel with update to the strategic plan. Is that your understanding as well, Atul?
Yeah, and it's interesting for us to, in terms of communication, to acknowledge that I don't think any of us are correcting each other. We all have flashlights and we all are seeing, we're walking through a room that's a little bit murkier than we'd like it to be. And we're all
Sure.
trying to figure it out. So yeah, it's what you're talking about is consistent with my understanding as well. I feel like it might be beneficial for the commission to first discuss the idea whether we want to consider an interim. The other approach could be that we get on with the discussion of what our outcomes are and what we're looking for, and then let that dictate the decision of whether we want an interim or not. So we could go one way or the other. I would I'm just going to state my preference at this particular point would be to make an advisement regarding whether we want to pursue the idea of an interim at the present time. But I'm open to sidelining that conversation until after we have a discussion about what we're looking for.
I am intrigued by the interim. It obviously was a new idea that I didn't consider until we got the update from Steve from his conversation with Mycoff Fry. My concern about, so I kind of have been seeing it as we have Mycoff Fry and then we have Crossman or we have a DIY, but it seems like we need some sort of a search firm to help us hold our hands through this process. So my concern with Mycoff Fry was that they said that they wouldn't be available until August to begin a real general manager, or not a, but you know, the sort of full general manager search. But based on the email update from you, Steve, it did indicate that Mycoff Fry could possibly place us with an interim very quickly, despite the fact that they couldn't start the full general manager search until August. Is that correct?
It's my understanding that,
Okay.
based upon my conversation with that person, was that they have several former either GMs or individuals that were in executive positions with utilities that are, you know, either semi-retired or retired and quote available, and they could fill an interim position pretty quickly from a list of, you know, people that Mycoff Fry know that are available, if that's the way to put it. This is something that apparently that they do, you know, on a regular basis as well. I mean, Prothman does the same thing on, you know, but not focused on electric utility. They have interim management services. So, but yes, that's long-winded answer. That's correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Murphy.
Oh, I'm sorry, Christine, am I cutting in front of you?
No, no.
You know, I'm not against an interim, but I don't understand by Mykoff suggesting that we pay an hourly rate based on a salary of $300,000 to an intern. And it talks about the goals too of what, you know, what maybe we would like to do as commissioners in the future. My concern, and I need information from the two of you, is what we have accomplished now as a PUD with obligations. You know, we got WIRA, we got WID, we got all kinds of obligations. We have tribal, we have, we just have so many things going on in Whatcom County that needs our attention, that's a general manager that works for us. This next goal, this intern seems to be taking us to a whole new level, which I'm not against, but I would like to suggest we study it before we make that suggestion, because how do we bring somebody in at that kind of a salary without clear directions from us to that person? And the next level too will be a voter's approval too. This is a big one. So do we focus on what we have now and try to keep it going? And then we look at specialties, like saying we want to do a study and we want to go to this next level. So we bring in people to perform studies, firms, and then we make decisions. And then if we go to a $300,000 salary, then we do it that way. I got to admit, I'm confused because I think we're skipping one important part. We have an obligation right now to our community, our customers and staff, and we seem to be leaving that behind and moving forward. I need something from the two of you, please.
Mike, can you just clarify that you said you think we're leaving people behind just then? What did you mean by that?
Well, I don't know if the word behind is correct, but if we move to want to be the provider of power and broadband and other things, and if that's our main goal in Whatcom County in the future, I'm open to looking at it. But I know we have everyday obligations right now. I know that our staff right now, including Steve, well, we used to continue to be in meetings every week. Now we do everything by this viral, but there's a lot of commitment from us to our community and our customers that I think we need to settle that part first, make sure that's being carried on. And then we move into this higher level of providing. Does that make sense? Am I answering your question? That's what I feel like we're leaving behind.
Yeah. Go ahead, Atul.
So I'd like to address, I think, a point that might be helpful to Commissioner Murphy, but also provide transparency and visibility to my personal perspective as one commissioner. I believe in personally, in organic evolution in any group I'm part of. And what that means is honoring the good things that an organization is doing and figuring out how to do. So that, I don't know if that helps, but I hope it does. The second thing that slightly separate, it's a separate topic, but somewhat related to this previous statement, is the topic of whether we want to hire some kind of an interim. And Commissioner Murphy, you're raising some really important points about where's the beef in the process? When are the commissioners going to finally huddle and really talk about, you know, our hopes and aspirations? That needs to happen. I'm not sure this agenda item today is the right place to do it yet. Because I need to probably spend a little bit of time preparing it and to put my thoughts together. But I wanted to state the underlying philosophy. As the third point, I think it's important to recognize that an interim kind of begs the question of our, meaning the commissioners need to have our huddle. And an interim feels a little bit like a Band-Aid. So at this particular moment, not having all the data, I'd like or the experience, I'd like to have ideally to make take a position on the subject. I feel it's premature, certainly, to entertain the idea that Mycroft presented, which is to identify an interim manager. I'm not suggesting that I'd never be open to the idea, but it doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't seem like it addresses the core of the issue, and potentially could introduce new factors that could create more confusion in how we move forward. And so for that reason, I personally feel I don't want to make a decision. I don't want to entertain the idea of an interim manager at this particular time, but I'm just speaking for myself.
Can I share, can I, sort of speaking for myself also, can I go ahead and share my perspective then?
Please, Commissioner.
So, you know, when Steve and I had our last check-in, we were talking about this as well. And, you know, given what I knew at that point with the interim and the delay that Mycroft Fry presented, you know, what I told Steve is if I had to make the decision right now for everyone about how we move forward, I think I would hire Prothman, even though I don't think they have as much experience with utilities. They have worked with some PUDs, but I think that delaying the process is bad for the organization. I think being in limbo is stressful for everyone involved, and getting started soon will give us all a sense of relief. And Prothman is local, they can get started soon. And the other thing, I'm reading this book right now. It's about hiring, because I figured I should start learning a little bit more about this. It's called Who. If anyone wants to borrow it, I can drop it off. But so much of hiring people is about your personal network and your personal connections. And so I do think that this firm is going to help us. But at the end of the day, a lot of the work is going to be on us as commissioners, no matter what firm we hire. We're going to have to figure out what outcomes we want from this person. And we're going to have to tap into our own networks. We're going to have to do the interviews and really make sure that it all checks out with us. And so I think it's easy to belabor this process around the search firm, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to be more about us than the search firm. That's my feeling. And so what I would do is I would try to get going with Prothman as soon as possible, and have them kind of be our people that keep us on track, make sure we're having these huddles that we need to have, and really get going in earnest.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant. Commissioner Murphy, is it okay if we let John, he raised his hand. Please go ahead, John.
Well, I was just going to provide an observation, and I guess it tails behind what Commissioner Grant was just saying. You have a lot of, and what Commissioner Murphy and all three of you, but in a different perspective, possibly. You have a lot of things going on in the community that you're engaged in right now, that your current staff are the key persons leading. That if you bring in an interim general manager during this time, whether it's the relationships with other organizations, other nations, the rest, it's going to be disruptive over the next 6-9 months to bring somebody in. So stop current leadership, start interim leadership, and then try to start new leadership again. So just from an external perspective and your own operational perspective, I think I wanted to bring that to the commissioner's thought process, that what that effect of multiple leadership changes will have over a short period of time. And I also was going to mention that the discussion about what you want, your strategic plan and everything else, that is in the task list under 2A that I had, although I have my email.
Commissioner Murphy. Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. thank you to both of you, Altua and Christine. As a commissioner, I feel like I represent the seat or the area or the county of Whatcom County. I mean, but I'm one of three, and I always try to make sure that I'm always listening and make sure that I try to do the best decision. Now, my wife and I are celebrating 49 years of marriage, and we still disagree. So it only takes two people to disagree. So I know it's very difficult in Whatcom County to say, bring everybody together and come up with one solution. So we do the best we can, but I'm very proud of what we as a PUD has accomplished. And I really appreciate Steve and staff and the crew and everything that they've done. And I just want to know if I'd like to keep that going, but if I'm missing something and, okay, Mike, we're going down the wrong road. You two feel we should be going somewhere else. I'm willing to listen because you can teach an old dog new tricks. I can be taught new things. I just want to make sure that we do what is right for, I got great grandchild now, and I want to make sure Whatcom County is a place that she can grow up in and be proud of. So I look a lot in the future. So I'm not one who hangs in the past. I hang in the future. But what we need to do to get there, I don't know.
So if I may, Commissioner Grant,
Go ahead.
I'd like to ask a question that came out of your comments. And the question is, have you, or can we have someone from staff also help on this question if needed? What are our requirements in terms of vendors to be able to retain a firm like Prothman, or retain Prothman specifically? Do we need to get a second vendor? What process?
Your policies speak to personal service. This is a personal service contract. There are no express structures in state law of how you do that. You can go higher. Your policy for purchasing speaks to an informal competitive process and reviewing that. I think you're in that process right now of vetting some, having had your general manager speak to the various groups. And if we're settling on a group to do that, that's fine. Under the delegation of powers, if you've said, Steve, go ahead and retain, he can bring back a contract. I can bring back a contract for you to approve. If you've said, yeah, we're based upon the conversations that staff have had and the reports, you want to have a follow-up meet and greet interview with Prothman, we can set that up in the next 2 weeks and try to have that for your commission agenda in 2 weeks, if that's the direction you want to go.
Commissioners, is it premature to make this recommendation to staff to go forward with a negotiating agreement with Prothman for services for placement of a GM?
Could I just address Mike,
Please.
Commissioner
Grant.
Murphy's comments? Yeah. So, Mike, I really appreciate your comments and also, have a tremendous amount of respect for, what we've accomplished so far at the PUD, and likewise think we always need to be thinking about the future and in for-profit institutions, right? You're focused on, how do we grow, right? And I think for us, we need to always be thinking about, how can we provide more benefits to our community in a financially sound way? And so as we look forward to the general manager, I just want to clarify that I think, of course, we need to find a general manager that has the skills and ability to really maintain our bread and butter business model, to make sure that we're providing exceptional services to our existing customer base, because they are critically important to us as an organization and a county, but then continue to find new ways to grow and be really strategic about it. We can't do everything. We have to prioritize, and we want to have someone in place that is really able to help us begin transforming in, strategic and thoughtful ways to provide more benefits to the community. So I think what I heard from you is that you're maybe feeling a little bit of tension about where we're going and what we're leaving behind. And I think that we need to kind of thread the needle and really find someone that's able to integrate where we've been with where we want to go. Does
I
that,
just, I just
Yeah,
like to, I just like to second that statement.
No, I appreciate what both of you are saying, and it's very difficult to hire a person. And I've been involved in hiring people of general managers, superintendents of schools and everything else. And it's very difficult. And a lot of people walk forward and say, I'm a leader. Well, what's your definition of a leader? You know, and the first thing a leader does is put everybody else above them. That's a good leader because they support their staff. They're there. They care about them. They care about their community. They care about their, you know, who they have to work with. They care about their commissioners. Because the worst thing we could ever do is hire somebody who disagrees with us. And then we got a lot of problems. And, you know, Altua, you've been involved with PUDs in the last couple of years, and you've probably seen, at least I have too, in cases at other PUDs where we're happy we're not in their shoes. We're happy we don't have their problems, because there have been a lot of managers, general managers that have left, and been a lot of confrontation between just commissioners and a manager. And so to me, I appreciate what you're saying. Sounds like we're going to work together to find the right person. And I appreciate that.
yeah, I think it's gonna be it's gonna be a really, really big decision. And but yeah, Atul, back to the comment that you said before about moving forward, just discussing retaining Prothman. I would be interested in having that discussion right now, if we can spend a few more minutes on this.
I think it's essential. I want to get a deliverable out of this agenda item.
Cool.
So if I may, I'd like to propose that that's what's on the floor for the next few minutes. This is a subject of, obviously not, we can't enter into contract based on this meeting, but we can advise staff to prepare the documents necessary to enter into contract. And I'd like that to be the subject of discussion. And I'd like to hear from anyone and everyone on this subject of advising staff to proceed.
I'm all for it.
I'm not against it. I just don't know if we as commissioners have sat down enough to discuss what we feel a GM job description should be. And so I don't know how much time that's going to take. Is that a 15-minute, or is that going to take weeks of us going back and forth discussing what we want to see?
Commissioner Murphy, if I may ask a clarifying question. Are you stating then that you think it is wise for us to have some degree of a position description before we retain a placement firm? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think it would be wise to do that, because don't you think whoever we hire, that's going to be the first question out of their mouth to us is, what do you want? And then we're going to look at each other and say, well, or we have to come up with an agreement, because maybe we each have a different vision of a general manager, and we'll be paying someone to sit back and listen to us. Is that what you want?
Could we then agree, as another clarifying question, could we then agree to put on our next agenda a discussion on a preliminary job description, a commissioner conversation of what we're looking for our next meeting? And of course, we wouldn't be approving a contract for next meeting, so we wouldn't be doing that until the next meeting anyway. So the only other thing that might be a complicating factor is if in the process of proceeding with an agreement that for example, Prothman would not be ready to enter an agreement with us or consider entering an agreement without a preliminary job description. And on that subject, I'd like to hear from the general manager.
Commissioners, you know, when we first start talking about utilizing a search firm, you know, we reached out to a couple of firms to see if they would provide services to do just what you're just talking about now, taking a look at not specifically at a job description, but defining what you feel you want in a new GM. And so we had actually asked a couple of individuals and a couple of search firms to look at, instead of doing the complete, process, starting out, setting the profile, not job description, but setting that profile that you all really developed with that search firm, and taking that separately as a piece of work before you decided whether or not you wanted to use an outside search firm to do the search and recruitment process for you. And so we had received that, that proposal from one of those firms to separate out, that whole process, or segregate that process, and start out with just setting that profile, working with you to define what you wanted that new GM to look like in terms of credentials and experience and leadership. And so the other part of that is that a firm like Prothman and a firm like Fry Mykoff and others can do the whole process, but the first step in that process is just that, is sitting down with the commissioners and listening to staff, but defining that and setting that profile. So, I think that if you would choose to hire a firm like Prothman or any of the search firms, they will take time. I should back up. I think the key part of their whole recruitment process is just what you're just talking about. Working with you to set, not, again, yes, taking a look at, quote, the job description, but it's more than that. It's setting that profile so that when you're ready to go out and actually start the recruitment, or they would, individuals that are applying for the position get a real sense of where the district at and what you have envisioned for that new GM to be. I mean, if you look at, over the last 3 months, I've looked at probably 50 quote profiles, if you would, from different search firms. And all you have to do is, I look at those profiles and I go, if I was applying for that position, city manager in Bellevue, I can tell by reading that profile exactly what's going on in that city, because they emphasize, labor relations, they emphasize leadership on project development, they emphasize communication in the community. Those are all the things that are laid out in that profile. And that's the work that that search firm would do with you and staff, and listening to the community as to, okay, without sitting down and going through the strategic plan and, and everything in there, that's where that hard work is really done. So.
Commissioner Grant. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I was just again responding to Commissioner Murphy, and I think that it's going to happen sort of. We're going to figure out. We're going to define what we want from a general manager as we move forward in the process, and I mean, I think that we can really start thinking through a lot of this soon. Again, I mean, I would really encourage my fellow commissioners to start thinking about, like, how will we know if the general manager is successful in 2 years when we sit down, what will be the indicators that we have hired the right general manager, and ideally if we can have metrics around that, right? So those are things that, maybe we could even start trying to jot those ideas that we have down right now and send them to John Sitkin, and John can, begin kind of being the keeper of our ideas around that idea of what outcomes we want. But I personally feel like the faster we can get under contract with Prothman, the better, because the fact that we're paying a firm will keep us moving fast and really, I think, get us disciplined about moving forward on this process.
Steve? Thank you, Commissioner.
Another thought is that it's almost the 1st of May. And we staff will start working on the 2022 budget in about a month. And I believe that if you choose to select a firm to start this process, between now and November, you will have an opportunity, whether you want to take a full separate meeting to go through their strategic plan and discuss elements of that, or if you want to have those discussions relative to beginning to set the 2022 budget, this is the time to start this thinking process. And I think that you can accomplish both the GM recruitment process at the same time. So, and you don't have to delay hiring a firm if you choose to do that. You don't have to delay the hiring of the firm. And I think that you'd hurt the process in terms of timing, not relative to my contract, nothing around that. Is that this is the time to get going, because if you can bring a new GM or select a new GM in the next 4 to 5 months here, that would give staff, you, the commission, and the potential new GM to really engage in setting the priorities that will be reflected in the 2022 budget.
John, please. Thank you, Steve.
Two or three things. I hear the building of a consensus to try to reach out to Prothman and bring a contract back at the next regular commission meeting. I hear the concept that Steve has relayed, the firm would have a kind of 2 or 3 tasks. The first task being to work through the job description and facilitate what you want in the next GM and the skills and attributes based upon the direction you're looking to go. So that necessarily involves revisiting the strategic plan or making modifications or setting a new one. So I think, Mike, Commissioner Murphy, that's how your concerns would be addressed, and building on what's here and what you may go forward. So if that's the direction, as I'm hearing the consensus coalesce here, my first question is, if that's accurate, does any commissioners want to have a one-on-one or group discussion with Prothman before the next regular commission meeting? And yes or no, there's no wrong answer to that. The next question is, given Steve's comments, given the discussion of Brown strategic planning, is it worth having on your next agenda or a special meeting before the next regular meeting to just review the current strategic plan so you can put some thought-focused discussion on what's been adopted in the past and what you may want to layer in or revise to go forward? Is that worth the time for you? So going back, is there consensus coalescing around Prothman? Should we work a contract back in 2 weeks for the next commission meeting? And second, do you want to have a discussion with them individually or as a group before that?
And third, do we want to have a special meeting to discuss a strategic plan?
Yeah, the current plan and build on that.
And the beginnings of a profile. So let's parse that into 3 items. First item is, are we ready to ask staff to bring a contract forward with Prothman? Commissioners Grant, Murphy, any more thoughts on that subject?
You know, as I said before, I think time is of the essence here. I think it's important to move forward quickly. If the other commissioners are comfortable with it, Atul, I know that you chatted with Mike Hoff-Fry. If you all would like, I'd be happy to talk to them on the phone briefly to get my read, but I know, Steve, you've talked to them, and we know that they're working actively in the community. They've sent us a proposal. So, I'm ready to move forward.
Commissioner Murphy.
I too know that we're in a real tight deadline, so I don't want to stall or hold anything up. From what I understand John's saying is Prothman could probably lead us through everything we need to do to get to the point of hiring a general manager. Our input, staff input, maybe even community. I'm willing to move forward now. I'm good with that.
Steve, do you have any reservations about that?
No, my, Commissioner Murphy, and I think all of you, have used the term, where you're in it, the timeline is critical here. I think the timeline right now that is so critical is if the commission is successful in choosing a new GM in the next 4 to 5 months, it's so important for that individual to be selected and start getting engaged in some way in development of that 2022 budget, because the 2022 budget absolutely has to reflect what your vision is over the next several years, as it is reflected also in strategic plan, obviously, but the strategic plan really, I think, should be reflected in what your vision is. And over the next, 2 to 3 months, I don't think that this is all up to the commission, but I don't think it's necessary to have a special meeting in the next month to talk about the strategic plan. I think that if you select, a firm like Prothman, they can come on pretty quickly and start having that discussion with you all. At the same time, we're, like I said before, by June, we're starting to work on the 2022 budget. So that's the timeline. I think that it's most critical right now. I wouldn't, the timeline in terms of my contract or June of 2022, that's not the timeline that I don't think that you should be concerned about.
Thank you, Steve. John, do we need a motion on this, or is this mutual advisement from the commission sufficient?
I think you've given me direction that we bring back your action. You're not approving anybody. I don't want to formally approve anybody. So you're giving me direction with Steve to go out to reach out to Prothman to bring back a contract. And for clarity, there's kind of 2 elemental tasks. One is facilitate your discussion on identifying what you want, the job description, metrics, if you would, as well, from what Commissioner Grant was saying, and then the search process, the recruitment process. So those 2 large elements are what we'd be seeking from Prothman. And if that's the consensus, then that's what I've heard thus far.
Yes, I believe that's the consensus.
Then Steve and I have enough direction to go forward. And I think that mirrors what the 6 or so tasks that I had in the email, and that's kind of what I'll be following.
Okay, good. Now, the other item that I'd like to now have the commission speak to is the need for further discussion amongst commissioners. I think about Commissioner Murphy's comments about what do the commissioners really want out of this position. I think about a review of the strategic plan as it relates to this position. So do we want to do this as an agenda item at our next regular meeting? Or do we want to do a special meeting on this subject between now and our next regular meeting? What's the will of the commission?
Well, just piggybacking off of what Steve said, I feel like there's a chance that Prothman will be able to come on board quickly. I don't know that for sure, but maybe we wait and we have a special meeting with them so that they can begin, absorbing our direction that we're trying to coalesce towards. And then, we begin thinking about, updates to the strategic plan as they relate to both the budget and the general manager profile. But I think there would be some benefit to having a Prothman staff person involved in that if we contract with them.
Okay, Commissioner Murphy?
No, I agree with that. I just also would throw in there is we bring them on and we meet, but John, is there any way, I know you're always saying, but I really gain a lot from listening to my fellow commissioners, and I like talking back and forth. Is there any way we can meet in the future just to discuss through a special meeting, where we want to go and stuff, or do we always have to keep doing this?
Well, it is a special meeting, or it could be on a regular agenda, either one. I think what Commissioner Grant and Steve were speaking to is you have that discussion of what you want facilitated by Prothman, and that'd be part of the contract. My concept of having an interim meeting would just be to get the current strategic plan in front of you and a discussion around it, so you kind of got your education before you went in with Prothman. Probably more efficient to do that with Prothman. I appreciate what Steve was saying there, but I think Commissioner Murphy, what you want, having that commission discussion is what I think we're one of that first elemental task that you would be hiring Prothman to work with you on.
So I'm taking that we will, at our next regular meeting, from here from Commissioner Grant, Commissioner Murphy, we will be reviewing a contract. And I'm not hearing a particular desire to meet between now and our next meeting again for the purpose of further discussing the general manager position among commissioners. I'd be open to I'm open to either pathway.
I fully expect at some point here, we're gonna need to have a fairly long special meeting where we really dig into this. And I feel like in normal times, it would be sort of like a all-day special meeting, retreat type thing, obviously with the public invited, since all of our meetings are public meetings. But, I think that not to be assigning homework to people, but I think that obviously reviewing the strategic plan and really doing a lot of thinking on our own in anticipation for what we're going to be doing over the next few months would be beneficial for all three of us to be doing.
Well, that's great. And you're not assigning homework, but I took it it's a great point. It's time for me to do, each of us perhaps, but I'm speaking for myself, for me to do my own soul searching and stop procrastinating some of the things I've been wanting to read and some of the things I've been wanting to think about. So
once
thanks.
the teacher, always the teacher.
Yeah, the teachers come out.
So are we saying we're gonna wait to have a special meeting until after our next meeting?
Yes, I believe that's the consensus.
That's what I heard.
Great. Are there other items? And I'd invite any further comments. Steve, on the subject of the general management appointment process?
No, I think the process that you have agreed to right now in selecting or moving ahead potentially with a search firm like Prothman, I think is the right approach. I do think that having a special work session on the quote, strategic plan, I think is essential. I don't think it's necessary, like I said before, in the next few weeks. I think that it can be a good part of the discussion and the first work session, if you would, on the 2022 budget. The other thing I would say is that, and you all know this, but I just would reiterate, the selection of the GM, or the new GM, is only, one decision that needs to be made over the next, year or so. In terms of potentially replacing some other staff retiring, but it also the discussion around, the strategic plan and all other things that are going on in terms of what Commissioner Murphy called out earlier, is that, you know, whether it's water resources in, you know, Whatcom County, or with its, whether it's new development at Cherry Point, or working, you know, all the other things that we're engaged in, there's going to be some significant opportunities for, you know, decisions on where we go, what staff looks like, and I don't mean individuals, but, you know, how staff is, the staff resources are brought to the table, and continuing where we're trying to go right now with, you know, with staffing up on the positions that we're trying to fill. There's, over the next several months here, there's going to need a lot of decisions that will, you know, need to carry us forward, not just the GM replacement, but others for the next several years. So.
Thank you, Steve. Well, if there's no further comments on this particular item 4A, let's proceed then in our agenda.
Thank you,
to-
Commissioners.
Thank you, John. Let's proceed to item number 5, new business. And the first item is the annual financial report. Steve or Annette?
Annette's muted right now, but Annette will take this, yes.
Thank you, Annette. I thought that we put you to sleep in the last conversation.
No, I have 3 screens going and I'm trying to figure out where I actually am.
Annette,
So,
does that
Looks like
take
our
the-
icicle growing facility is functioning well.
are those our frozen assets?
Oh, uh-huh. All right. Well, we're going to go back to that. Good morning. Sorry about that. As you may know, every year we are required by the state auditor's office to file an annual report with their office by the end of May. That is coming up, and so that is what's before you right now to approve. But we also take that opportunity to kind of go through how we did in the previous year, and just going forward with this. The previous year, bottom line, we did well. This is a lot of text, which you're not supposed to really do in PowerPoint, but I'll just give you the highlights. Our 2 big challenges in last year were the COVID, obviously, and the district came through the COVID quite well. We did have some additional expenses in getting our Zoom, as we're all using, set up, and some home offices set up. But it was not much. The last time I looked, it was under $25,000. So that we can easily absorb. As far as revenue, we were not hit like most of the other PUDs and districts and utilities, just probably because we don't have the residential that most of them have. And then as far as expenses outside of the COVID, those dropped quite a bit because we were unable to do a lot of our projects. So, and then the second big hurdle we had in 2020 was the Alcoa curtailment, which ended up in August of last year. And that, but because of how our rates are set, we have a lot of fixed rates in there. And so our revenues were down some, but not as much as they could have been. And so in 2021, we were able to put that into the budget. They did drop their fixed operating piece and then also their consumption. So that was incorporated. But overall, 2020, bottom line, we came through it all quite well. And so what I'd like to present here is it's a bit of a modified financial report. And what it is, it's more in the budget format. In our annual report, there's a lot of information and a lot of details, but it's pretty long, pretty dry, and it's pretty prescribed by SAO on what we present and how we present it. And so what we do here is we take the opportunity to throw in the budget so you can see how actually we did versus what we planned. And so this is comparing to last year and then also to the budget and the variances. In the next couple slides, I break this down and we could go section by section on this. The other thing I wanted to bring out on this is as opposed to a regular GAAP financial statement or generally accepted accounting principle, we've taken out the non-cash expenses. So there's no depreciation, no amortization. What also is taken out is that pass-through to Phillips 66. That is reflected in revenue and also expenses. But I've taken that out just so you can see the variances a little better, because that's a really big number. Pass-through is usually around 9 million. So that tends to hide the smaller variances. So that piece is taken out. So for the first one we have here is the revenue on this. And as you can see, we do pretty well, except for irrigation, but irrigation is always a variable. I did look at one website, and 2020 was a little bit wetter than normal, so that could contribute to that. And then also the miscellaneous revenue here. You can see we're about $100,000 under what we were the previous year. And in 2019, we're also working with Green Apple Project, doing preliminary studies and being reimbursed for that. So that's where the majority of that variance comes in there. And then down below, excuse me?
And how would you, Annette, how would you, sorry, how would you like to do questions? Would you like to do it by slide, or would you like us to hold questions until the end?
Oh, why don't you do it if you have one per slide? And so
Okay.
down below here, we have just the historical consumption of just both our water and our power. So any questions on this? All right, so expenses. Again, a high level look, lumping all our expenses into 3 categories. And the 2 I wanted to comment on was the labor and the O&M expenses that had the bigger variances. Labor, because we are somewhat spoiled, we usually have a pretty steady workforce, pretty steady, everybody's full-time. So to budget out that labor is usually pretty easy. Sometimes if we have a major fragilized event, there's more overtime than can be predicted. But what is the hard piece is segregating that labor out. So we have here, which is your main expenses, and then the pieces that get broken out of that is our extraordinary maintenance and then our capital projects. Those pieces get pulled out. Both extraordinary maintenance and our capital projects were way under in 2020, mainly due to the COVID. So all of this landed here in the expense side of it. So that's why you see the 2020 expense over what the 2019 and the 2020 budget was, because those extra pieces weren't pulled out. And then on the O&M expenses, you can see the big one being is that extraordinary maintenance down below. We had budgeted over $1 million and we accomplished roughly $100,000. A lot of that was a lot of the projects either couldn't be done by just our skeletal staff or couldn't safely be done. But we also had experienced some difficulty in just getting the items we would need. There was a lot longer lead times, shipping delays, all of that contributed to a delay or inability to do those projects, both capital and the extraordinary. Any questions on that?
Yes, I have a question. So the question I have is regarding the extraordinary maintenance. Would we now expect that we'll also see a very large variance next year because we'll be doing a lot of extraordinary maintenance that didn't happen this year?
It shouldn't be, because when we finalized our budget in November, basically is when it all got put together, we knew we were way behind in extraordinary maintenance. So that was put into the 2021 budget.
Okay.
If anything, I mean, you know, along those lines, both capital and extraordinary maintenance, we are really, really busy this year trying to catch up on some of these things. So, but if we're still, we may, you know, I actually don't know off the top of my head, but I know some of the things we are still experiencing a little bit of lag time. So it actually could still be a bit under, but we are trying really hard to get a lot of these things caught up on.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So Annette, with O&M expenses, there's those 4 categories under there. Where is, do we put labor expenses under O&M expenses?
Only if it's attributed to the extraordinary maintenance.
Okay,
So
Okay.
regular labor, there's the regular labor up above. Anything that labor that's attributed to extraordinary would be down below. And then any capitalized would also be pulled out of the regular labor pool.
okay.
I have an additional question on administration under labor. Could you explain the variance there?
Yeah, that's, you kind of need to look at it overall. And that is because how I budget the capitalized labor piece is pulling it out of Dwayne and Alex labor, even though it can be pulled out of everybody across the board. So it can be pulled out of Brian, it can be pulled out of water operators, it can be pulled out of the electrician. But to simplify my budget, any capital labor in the budget is pulled out of Dwayne and Alec because they are a lot of the key labor in those projects. So because again, the labor is not pulled out because we didn't work on the capital and the extraordinary, that is showing a higher than budget amount.
Got it. Thank you.
Because you essentially had to shift it into administration.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so this is our grants. And so this kind of following along our theme, we had budgeted, and grants are always a little bit tricky because basically it's a wish list that we develop when we do our budget of what grants we would like to work on. And so we had budgeted roughly over $1 million in grants and worked on just as not even that. The biggest one was that mitigation supply, and that we didn't have any activity on that at all. And why we always budget the revenue expenses to be in the perfect world where you get them all in the same year, but reality is you don't. So down below, it's the offset of the revenue versus the expenses that we had in 2020 and the variance there. And then you can see over on the budget of $1,080,000 over there, and which projects we've been working on. Any questions there?
Nope.
Okay, and at the bottom of that financial statement was more of the balance sheet type items and the capital costs. And so the debt service at the top, that is usually really straightforward. We have our debt service schedules, we know what we're expected to pay. But when we were developing the 2020 budget back at the end of 2019, we had forecasted that we were going to close those new bonds by the end of 2020, and those bonds actually did not close until February of 2021. And that also included a refinance. Those new bonds included a refinance piece, and it also includes new money. So that's what that variance is between budget over on the debt service. And then in line 13, that transfers for capital projects. What that is that's what we budget every year to come out of our revenue from our rates to put aside for either current or future capital projects. It's somewhat akin to money you pull out of your paycheck every month for a vacation. And sometimes that vacation's little and it's in the same year. And sometimes you save it up for a couple of years and do a big world trip. So that's why you can kind of see some of our capital fund balances can vary at times because we haven't spent it, but we are, we eventually do spend it. And then down below, the capital improvement projects, just a high level look of where we did spend money. And again, as we've talked about, you can see the budget was over 7 million and we only spent roughly 2 million in 2020. Any questions on that?
Thank you.
Okay, and then the final slide here is a little bit more of the pictures. Brian always says I have way too many numbers. So trying to graph it a little bit more. Just some high level looks at some of our metrics here. So over on the left-hand side is more of the cash. And so the upper left is a high level cash flow statement. Our beginning balances, money coming in, money going out, and our ending balances. But that also includes our reserves and our restricted cash that we can't use to do operations or any of our capital projects. So down below that, the ending cash balance graph, the red piece is what we can actually use. The blue and the green pieces are monies that we have to set aside, whether it be our emergency reserve or bond reserves or our operating capital reserves. That's money we can't really touch, but the red piece is what we can. And so over on the right-hand side, just to kind of give you an idea of what we've, the variance in our capital project spending, you can see over the last couple of years. And what I wanted to point out is our 2021 budget, we have capital project spending of 8 million. So it's going to be, right now, we're planning on quite a bit more than what we have in the last several years. So again, we are busy. And then down at the bottom right-hand side, I always like to put this in front of you just to keep you aware of what our yearly debt service is. So we're just under 3 million a year. And what this does not include is, if you remember during our 2021 budget, going out, industrial water had just received a study from our engineering firm of potential big projects that we need to start thinking about. But the timing of when we want to do those and how we want to do those is still somewhat tentative. So any new debt has not been reflected here. But those bigger projects that they had put out in that report, we will be needing to issue new debt for. Unless we put them way out there, which I don't think is recommended. Any questions on that?
Annette, would you be comfortable relabeling that bottom left chart the Robin versus Rick chart?
Actually, that might be more the cash balances. Yeah. How much reserves you want. The blue piece would grow significantly under Robin.
Thank you.
Right. So that concludes my high level presentation. So I guess just to continue on that, we are asking for approval of our annual report. So then I can start working on sending that to our state auditor's office.
Commission, any
Annette?
comments on Commissioner
Oh, I'm
Murphy?
sorry. I don't have any questions. I was just going to tell Annette, thank you as always. I never get tired of saying it. Hopefully she'll never get tired of hearing it, but always
Thank you.
appreciate all your work. If there is no questions, I'll make a motion to approve the 2020 annual financial report.
Is there a second?
I will second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 The motion carries. Thank you, Annette.
Thank you, Annette.
So the next item on the agenda is the 115 kilovolt transmission pole replacement project, 5B. I see that's Brian.
Alec will take that.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'd like to point one mistake out on our memo. Down in the table on all the costs for the lower three contractors, Michaels, Magnum, and Patelco, the additive alternate amounts were listed under total. So those should all be shifted to the left, just to clarify. And so what this project is an annual structural replacement project we've been undertaking for quite a few years. If this one is approved and we build this will conclude our initial going through of our entire transmission line structures and replacing the structures that our engineers have recommended. So it's kind of a nice completion if we can complete this. We received 4 bids for this, as you can see below. I might explain a little why we had both a base bid and an additive alternate. And the reason we did this is because we don't always know what the bid price is going to be. And the amount of work we had scoped was very close, if not in excess of our budget for this project. And so we chose a base bid of structures to replace that we knew we could budget for. And then we were hopeful, if the bids were low, that if we were to get a good price, we could complete all of them. And so the additive alternate was a way to achieve that should the bids be low. If the bids were too high, we could just award the base bid and not the alternate. In this case, we had a very low and good bid from Titan. And we would like to recommend awarding both the base bid and the additive alternate to Titan. And for the amount you see there of $344,832.82. And if you'd like any further discussion, please let me know.
Commissioner Murphy.
Yeah, thank you all too. Alec, because of the bid, the additional, we are going to get all the polls done now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the other question, so that's good. And the other question is, it says that they will select the material and hardware. Select the materials. I mean, they are going to be picking the poles we're going to use, or is there an engineer recommendation on what poles we use? Because there's different grades of poles, and I'm not sure what you're going after.
Well, we have a standard specification for our structures, and it calls out the class of pole, but we aren't able to dictate where they buy those poles. So that's probably, the contractor is going to supply all the materials. We're not furnishing them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think what you're telling me that instead of purchasing, say, from Osier Cedar that's in Whatcom County that could provide the poles, they can go south or even north, I guess, to provide the poles, correct?
Yeah, we can't dictate where they purchase their materials. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Alec, I have a couple questions. First is on the chart. So again, I understand that the last column is incorrect. The total column is incorrect. But I'm curious, you didn't put an entry in particularly for Patelco for the additional alternative component. And the reason I think it's important for that one is because let's say their additional alternate number was 45,000, for
If I
example.
can interrupt, that was the first thing I mentioned. Those three lower contractors in the table, those additive alternate prices are in an incorrect position. They should be.
Oh,
shipped
now I
to the
understand
left.
what you're saying.
So
Okay,
this-
okay, I get it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
I didn't understand that. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
The second question does come back to polls. So what's our experience with polls? Is there variability in quality and durability of polls from our experience? We don't stipulate anything about the sourcing of polls, but is that something to consider and to think about? Because obviously the life of the pole is directly related, it ends up costing us money, so.
Yeah, we do have our standard specification for our structures that calls out the proper kind of pole. I think what we've experienced in the number of years of these projects is, depending on the year and or maybe a range of years, the treatment can penetrate wood not as far as maybe other wood. One thing we experienced, as you may or may not know, our structure was first constructed in the later 50s, early 60s. And in the 80s, we had some structures replaced. In some of the cases of those poles from the 80s, the wood was worse than the wood from the 50s. So there can be quite a bit of variability, I think, when you're treating wood. But we, once again, we provide our standard, and I think we don't know how well a company is going to produce their product or not.
Now, if I can jump into, Alex, what we found with the original 50s poles, the treatment process then was rock solid. They were using chemicals that would not be acceptable by today's environmental standards. They did allow the poles to last considerably longer, but we no longer have that as an option. So some of the newer poles, the preservatives don't accommodate longer lasting poles.
At a later time, if you guys would indulge me, I in a prior life, I had a lot of experience with pole treating technology, and I'd love to share what I know about it. But anyway, that's another conversation, not pertinent to this.
I have two quick questions. One is just, I was hoping you could educate me. You said that the district has received high definition photographs collected by flying a drone above the pole structures. What were we looking for exactly with those photographs?
Well, we can get a photograph up close from the top down of the condition for one thing, and we can put a drone, the focus and keep humans far away from the energized line as well. The drone is very efficient. It can take numerous photos in a short amount of time from all perspectives. It can hit every angle. We look at the cross arms. We look at the hardware that's bolted onto those cross arms. We look at the condition of the top. Sometimes there's insects in them, or birds might sit there and their poop might create the pole that erode faster. So those kinds of things.
Cool. I just was curious, and so thank you for educating me on that. I guess my last question was just, I have been hearing a lot about transmission lines with the all the clean energy targets that all of us are focused on really across the country, and community acceptance of transmission lines is a big deal, and have been learning a little bit about how to increase community acceptance of transmission lines. But I just was curious if we've ever had any issues from the community related to our transmission lines in terms of acceptance. I mean, I know that we're not building new ones, we're just replacing them, but just was curious about that overall.
I can jump in on this one, Commissioner. We haven't had any community objection to our 115 transmission line corridor. We've kind of had the reverse problem over the years where individuals or developers will encroach on our transmission line corridor, wanting to place structures within that corridor. So that has been an issue that we've had to deal with over the years. The other thing, unlike PSC that has a lot of distribution, we have a broad corridor. We have a 115 kV line on H-frame structures, which are basically two-pole structures, within for most of the route, a 100-foot corridor.
Yeah.
That we also maintain the vegetation. So we're in real good shape there. However, if we were to build a new line, I'm sure we would encounter some of that community concern or opposition you're talking about. I would suspect that depending on our needs, we might reconductor the existing transmission structures with higher capacity conductors, or even coming in with parallel conductors on the same structures, same corridor to avoid some of those issues.
Okay, one last question then. You were saying if we needed to upgrade to higher capacity conductors, right now as we're doing our energy planning, huge variation right now in terms of what we could see with future need for electricity at Cherry Point. With this transmission pole replacement, are we thinking ahead to that? Is there 115 kV transmission poles. Well, tell me about what we would need to do if we needed higher capacity in the
Double,
future.
triple.
Well, the one thing, first of all, we're in good shape with the replacement of these final H-frame structures. We have pretty much new structures throughout our 13-mile transmission line corridor. They're H-frame structures. They're capable of supporting more weight than the existing conductors that are hanging off there now. So we'd be in good position to either replace the existing existing conductors with higher capacity, or bigger lines, if you will, or actually paralleling, using spacers and putting additional conductors on the existing poles.
Okay.
If that answers your question.
Yeah.
I think we're in real good shape. I mean, we're well beyond PG&E in California.
Glad we're setting the bar high. Thank you for answering all my questions. I don't have any more.
Commissioner Murphy, you have any questions? How representative are these numbers for pole replacement of numbers that perhaps are typical for pole replacement? Because it seems it's a lot cheaper per pole. We're replacing 56 poles. Is that correct?
Yeah, one thing that was the project manager for Titan, I've got a relationship with. He used to work for the other company, Michaels. We've done a number of projects together, and when I saw his price, I called him immediately, and I think the answer they gave me was, we're looking at second quarter pole pricing instead of third quarter pole pricing. So they just happen to have a better purchase than the others, it looks like.
So we're talking about 56 poles being replaced for $345,000 approximately.
Yeah.
I can't help but compare that to the numbers that Gina Stark was reporting in terms of pole replacement for relating to.
Is that replacement or is that new? Because permitting for new, there's a much higher per pole rate.
Those are replacement numbers, yes. And the numbers that I had heard from the port was $50,000 a pole.
We've averaged between 8,000 to 11,000 per pole, and our H-frames are 2 structures.
Steve, can you clarify that difference? Maybe we can talk about it another time. It doesn't pertain to this agenda item.
I think that in reference to the ports, and Gina's numbers that she's seen, or that the consultants have suggested, have more to do with replacement poles for using PSE's current structures and adding, replacing those structures to carry the added fiber. I think that's where those numbers are coming from.
I just couldn't help but notice a difference in the amount per pole.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that those costs were all in cost. I mean, it wasn't just the pole, it was the permitting, it was the Puget fees for working with them. So it's not just a pole replacement, whereas ours, basically permitting is minimal at this point. So.
Okay. It's not pertinent to this agenda item, so I apologize for that diversion. I've got no further questions. So we need to approve the awarding of the bid for this order. So I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to award capital improvement project to FB Titan for an 115 kV transmission pole replacement project.
I'll
Is there a
second that.
All those in
second.
favor?
Oh, I'm
Thank
sorry.
All those in
Aye.
favor, please.
Aye.
Aye.
The
Commissioner,
motion carries.
thank you.
Thanks, Alec.
Yeah, thank you, Alec. Next time on the agenda, item 5C, the interlocal agreement between the city of Sumas and transfer BPA energy efficiency incentive funding to the city of Sumas.
Ryan?
Yes. Good morning, commissioners. Every 2 years, we are allocated a budget for energy efficiency incentive, projects, a budget from Bonneville Power Administration that covers their 2-year rate period. And every 2-year rate period, towards the end of that rate period, we will get requests from other utilities for transfers of our EEI budget that we aren't utilizing within that current rate period. And so this year is no exception. The city of Sumas has made a request for a transfer of $75,000 of our EEI budget to them so they can complete some projects they have underway this rate period. I will note also, we've had contacts from 3 other utilities. I suspect I will be coming back with another request at the next commission meeting. And those 3 utilities are Okanagan PUD, Clallam PUD, and also the city of Blaine. So this is not an unusual circumstance, and it happens every couple of years. So the city of Sumas has approached this. They've sent a letter requesting the transfer. They're going to be using, if they get that increased budget, they will be using those funds for some industrial lighting projects primarily to complete those projects before the current Bonneville rate period, which ends this September. We have sufficient budget remaining to make this transfer. We will be getting a new budget as of October 1st of this year. So it does not put us in any bind for any energy efficiency projects we may have underway to be able to help fund them. So I'd be glad to answer any questions.
So any questions from the commission? I have a question. Commissioner Murphy.
Yeah, O'Toole, you and I might be asking the same question. But every year we're approached with this BPA EEI budget, and it bothers me. I know O'Toole and I have talked about it, that we are giving this money away, even though it's being used for good things, to others, where we cannot seem to find a way to use it ourselves. And again, here it's going to go off. I'm all for supporting Sumas. Says they're going to use the money for industrial customers. So it looks like they're benefiting others. It's not really going to benefit the public, as I was hoping that money would be used for, as we've done in the Blaine, the street lights we've done for Blaine, and other things we've done for Blaine. So I do have some concerns about, it being used for public use, I guess. I mean, private use. So anyhow, I just wish we as a PUD could find a way to use this money here. Solar, wind, anything in that way to do good in Whatcom County.
I can
Okay.
address that, Commissioner. Starting specifically with the city of Sumas, even though they're small, they're a multi-sector electric utility, and they have used EI funds for rebate programs and for specific projects for residential, commercial, and their small industrial base they have there. It just so happens this time around, that's where they have the need to finish up some projects, primarily involving those industrial customers, but could just as well from past years been residential or commercial. On the broader picture, one of the issues that we face is that we're an industrial utility, and we have one, as you're obviously aware, one customer, large load, and then we have our 2 water plants. And those are where the opportunities are for us on our system. We currently have, if I count right, 4 projects lined up with Phillips 66, large projects. The issue for us right now is timing. You've got a refinery, 24/7 operation, and we've got to time those projects either when they do a turnaround or do a slowdown so they can take process offline, or we do projects that don't involve any downtime. So when they're ready to go and we get the timing right, we'll implement those projects, and it'll take a significant amount of our EEI budget to accomplish that. The other thing is, we've always taken the position in the past as a utility that if we can't expend those funds, if our two brethren public utilities can use them, it's money spent in the county. So in that sense, it's an economic development. We're assisting other public utilities in the county for countywide projects. So it does benefit the residents of Whatcom County. I think you also mentioned the issue I brought up in the past about using the funds for renewable projects. Under the Bonneville EEI policy, these funds cannot be used directly for a renewable project. They're for energy efficiency. That's the resource they're trying to capture with those investments. However, that being said, for each project we take on our system, we can actually claim what's called the utility incentive, which means based on the kilowatt hour savings projected for that particular project, we can claim 5 cents per kilowatt hour to use for other purposes. So if it was 100,000 kilowatt hours, let's say in savings, we could get about $5,000 in incentive to use, and those incentive dollars that come to us, we can use for anything. Bonneville recommends we use it to cover our administrative costs, but the reality is those are untethered funds. We can use those for renewables. Because of that, in the past, we didn't use to take that incentive because we wanted all the money to go into the energy efficiency projects. But a couple of years ago, we changed up our policy and said, okay, we're going to start requesting, that incentive. And we set up a fund, a budget line item for that. And currently we've got $8,500 in utility and performance incentive funds sitting in that account to apply to a renewable project. So we are finding ways to capture some funds to do other things.
And I appreciate, I'm sorry, Christine, I appreciate that, Brian. And I only brought it up when you start talking about other counties wanting to apply for that money. I said, well, there it goes. Now it's leaving even Whatcom, but I would also like to use it for educational. I mean, there's a lot of education we can do out there to help Whatcom County to understand, being conservative on their energy. I'm always amazed to go by down streets at night and see every light on in everybody's house. And I want to knock on the door and almost go there and say, will you please turn your lights out? But, anyhow.
A lot of the utilities, and I'll use Snohomish as a good example, they're doing a wide range of program conservation or energy efficiency things. And a component of that is the education process, but that's programmatic conservation that we don't have because we don't have any residential commercial customers. And so we can't use funds from that. We could set aside, or we could use the utility performance payments to do that. We could set up an education process for the county, but typically the funds, the whole construct is you're trying to acquire an energy resource through conservation, and that's the primary purpose of the funds.
Well, I appreciate that. And when I met with BPA Elliott, when he was the CEO, he basically said, we can ask anything we want to do with that money. And it's just a matter of convincing them. And he said they will bend if we have a good reason to use it elsewhere. So He's not there no more, but so I don't know.
Well, I don't want to contradict the former administrator. I think, number one, he was referring to those utility performance payments. But number two is, yes, we can always weigh in with Bonneville, but they have far more constituents than just us. And anything they do in that arena, they're going to take a consensus. They're going to hear from other utilities at the same time, and there may be utilities that don't want the use of those funds for other than conservation. It's a big regional process for Bonneville to set up these programs, and we're just one player amongst 100 odd utilities that purchase power from Bonneville.
Thank you.
Commissioner Grant.
Yeah, Steve and I talked about this on our check-in call for a little while, and I just wanted to share that, one thing I was going to do was reach out to some of my contacts in Blaine and Sumas that, are elected officials, and just, I would love to keep as much of this money local as possible, like you, Commissioner Murphy. And I think that the more that we can sort of encourage projects, especially as, the projects that potentially qualify change, like this idea of efficiency, electrification as a form of efficiency is really catching on. So if there's ways that we could, help give Blaine or Sumas kind of a little bit more funding to start some sort of a new program, I would see that as a really big win. And obviously, anytime that we can use the funds with our existing customer, that is the best thing that we could do. And Brian, are you aware of the industrial energy efficiency, energy smart industrial program that BPA runs and provides? Okay, great.
Yeah, Commissioner, we actually participated in that. We're using an engineer provided by Bonneville now in identifying opportunities at the refinery and on our water system. So we've taken full advantage. It's a good program. We use it where we can.
Great.
But getting back to your idea, I think it's a good one. I'd fully support working more closely with the city of Blaine and Sumas, and maybe even formalizing some type of joint utility venture on energy efficiency. Right now, we already have interlocals with Blaine and interlocals with Sumas, so it wouldn't be that difficult to form, or informally or formally have a consortium. We talk about these things and kind of have a coordinated effort on energy efficiency and renewables.
I'd like to ask about the applicability of this EEI money for the purpose of the inline hydro energy recovery project that the PUD has been exploring with a vendor. The status of that is that if I recall, is that there's two delivery pipes, and they both have the ability to produce significant amounts of energy. I think between 75 and was it? I don't remember what the other was more, maybe more than 100 or. Brian, could you give me the numbers for the kilowatts on those two pipeline generation units?
What we had talked about with the firm that had come in to advise us, Canyon Hydro, is 175 to 250 kW unit at D station. And that's the first site that we've looked at.
So
primarily because we had another project going there, and we could add this one on.
So could this $75,000 not, and it doesn't have to be this 75, another $75,000. Could we use money from an EAI budget to conduct an engineering analysis? What it would take is take that recovered power and use it, or displace or offset production consumption at the pumps. Perhaps, I don't know if there's conduit, that we have buried along with our delivery pipeline? Could we run a wire from the regulator where the turbine that would be doing energy recovery is generating electricity? Could we run wire along the pipeline all the way back to the actual pump that's pumping the water and subtract that power from the consumption of power used in pumping the water in the first place? Is that a feasible energy recovery project? And could we do an engineering analysis with the EEI money that would be pure conservation? The reason I was attracted to that project and the reason I contacted Canyon Hydro and asked them to reach out to staff was because to me that seemed like the perfect opportunity to start shifting some of this EEI money into a project that truly would constitute conservation. And it would also be a renewables project too. So anyway, just thoughts on that, Brian.
Yeah, number one, currently we cannot use the EEI budget funds directly to do that type of engineering study, but we could use the utility performance payments that we're starting to accumulate to do that, and would be glad to. Interesting enough, we ran into this several years ago and had discussions with Bonneville that if we did a behind the meter renewables project, whether it was micro hydro or solar, it would look from the Bonneville side, because we would be reducing energy purchases from Bonneville because we have this behind the meter project, if we could use the funds to do that. Several years ago, the utility community weighed in with Bonneville and said, you know, renewables has got a life of its own now. We shouldn't be using the energy efficiency funds for renewable projects, even in the case of a behind the meter project. So Bonneville stopped allowing the use of those funds directly for renewables. I guess that's the long answer to that one. But on the third point you brought up, one of the challenges for us at D Station is its location. We have no electric facilities anywhere near D Station. We're powering that station off Puget system, and it's not a pump station, it's just a valve station. So the amount of energy we use is minimal compared to what that micro hydro can produce. So the immediate thing is it pushes in the direction of looking at a Puget interconnection to absorb that energy. The other thing I suppose we could do is a battery installation at that location to suck up some of the energy. But running a line all the way back to our nearest, either to our substation or all the way back to our water plant where the pumps are, economically, it just doesn't seem feasible.
Okay, I had to ask though.
Good question.
So we could certainly open a brewery or a grow up there in that location.
Yeah. Brewery is a definite possibility.
Any further discussion on this item? And I just wanted to express support for the idea that Commissioner Grant suggested. Obviously, we're very involved. Our PUD has become more so in the last couple of years, working with other PUDs across the state. And we obviously value all of the activity going on in the state. We're all elected as representatives in this county. So naturally, if we can keep the money in the county, that's desirable. And so as a commissioner, I support any idea to keep this money in the county, which means working even more proactively with Blaine and Sumas in particular for that reason. So the ideas around richer collaboration to put this money to gainful use in our county is something that I would very much support too, as a speaking for myself. So I believe we have under 5C, the need to approve the interlocal agreement with SUMAS and the transfer of BP Energy incentive funding. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion to approve the interlocal agreement with the city of Sumas and the transfer of $75,000 of our BPAA EEI program budget.
Second,
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Thank you. The motion carries. And the next item on our agenda is the award of bid for the refinery substation equipment purchase, 5D. Who's handling that?
I will take this one, commissioners, and then Alec will back me up on this, but on April 13th of this year, we received bids for new power transformers for the refinery substation. And we thought we were in pretty good shape. We actually received 9 bids by the bid deadline on the 13th. However, when we started review, it became immediate and obvious 5 of those 9 bids came in at a price that exceeded our engineer's estimate by more than 15%. So that immediately caused us to set those 5 bids aside, leaving us with 4 bids. Then in reviewing those 4 bids, both our internal review, we also had our electrical engineering consultant, BKI, review the bids as well. First thing we discovered was there was 4 bids, but only 2 different transformers were involved. We had 2 bids with GE transformers, 2 bids with the Virginia transformer. Further review revealed that all the bids had exceptions to either our standard contract or to the bid specifications themselves. And this presented a real dilemma. We looked at the lowest price bid. They had exceptions in their bid, as did the rest. Normally, this type of thing is handled in the pre-bid process. We'll have a bidders conference, and then there's an opportunity for the bidders to raise questions or objections to conditions in our contract or specifications, etc. And then there's a period after the bidders conference where they can submit questions, ask for clarifications. We review those. If we make changes, then we notify all the bidders. In this case, the exceptions that were presented in all these bids were never raised earlier in the bidder conference or that period before the bids were due. So long and the short of it is, we could not accept as responsive any of the remaining 4 bids that we received. And so we're recommending as staff, and the recommendation of our consulting engineer, is that we reject all bids and go back and rebid the transformers and address some of the exceptions, that were raised, and make sure we tighten things up and go back out to bid. We've tried to analyze why this has occurred, and there's a whole variety of reasons. I think in some cases, it's the staffing at the manufacturer's end in terms of being able to give good information to those that are going to bid. Other unfamiliarity with public bidding process. It's just a whole wide range of things, but we're pretty confident we can get things to the point where we can go back out to bid and get responsive bids this time around. The other thing I'll note is one of the concerns we had was timeline. Were we going to screw up the timeline on the project for which these transformers are needed? The determination was no, we can still meet our marks on the timeline for the project. And I guess with that, I'll stop and see if there's any questions.
Say, Brian, I
Commissioner,
appreciate what you said because you answered one of my questions. And that is, you thought you could come back and write it in such a way that the price will be within the engineer's estimate. I appreciate those words because I've seen bids rejected, turn right around and go back out to bid and wind up paying even more and having to accept one of those higher cost bids. So it sounds like you feel you can come within the engineer's estimate. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's always Commissioner, a real fine line here between, the engineer's estimate. You don't want it to be too high. That leaves money on the table, allows all the bids to come up. And you don't want it too low, or in this case, what's happened, we've got 5 bids that came in above estimate. So yeah, it's more of an art than a science on that.
Thank you.
Other questions? Brian, I have a question regarding this process. Have the vendors been notified that this agenda item has switched from approval to rejection? Is there some level of communication with the vendors that we're likely to reject all the bids?
Not at this point, Commissioner. Normally by now, before the commission meeting, we would have informed the bidder that had the lowest responsive bid that, this award approval was on the commission agenda for today. We did not send that out because of the difficulties and, the evaluation of all the bids. We will notify everyone after this meeting if the commission chooses to approve the rejection of all bids.
Is there expected to be, and I'm reviewing the documents, that's why my visual is gone. Is there any potential for consternation on the part of any vendor as it relates to this particular bid?
I can't surmise that there won't be some consternation, but the reality is these are large power transformers, and the amount of money involved ensures that we will have bidders. It's not just, a batch of distribution transformers. This is a much higher price. There's not a lot of those large transformer opportunities to bid out there right now. So,
And we had a plethora of bidders. We had a plethora of bidders. It was one of the most responsive bids we've had in recent past.
Yes.
So we're not concerned about the obvious in that regard, but I'm just asking that perhaps I'd like to hear from John about the subject about contestation of bid process and rejection of bids.
I think this was an appropriate step to take given the circumstances of what Brian described, and Brian and Steve consulted with me over the weekend on this, and I think Steve and I spoke Sunday, and I said I thought this was the correct process. Certainly some bidders might be frustrated, but you don't have to select the bid when you go out for the bid. You're not obligated to award the bid. You can reject and start the process over, and that's what's going to happen.
Quite frankly, we're more concerned about trying to award the bid and having protests from the other bidders.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically what happened is one of those cases where we actually learned from the bid process and discovered that additional clarity would allow us to get conforming bids that would be more suitable for the PUD's intended objective.
Correct.
If we're to summarize it, how is there other words you would use to summarize what we're doing here?
No, and I think it was a learning process, Commissioner. One of the things I didn't bring up, but we assume, and we'll do some evaluation and follow up with the bidders, is that some of the bidders didn't take into account where these transformers were going to be placed. I mean, part of the issue was you've got to bring those transformers to a refinery, drive them through the refinery, and then large crane unload them and place them inside the substation. And it was clear some of the bidders didn't address the circumstance and that we might end up, if we awarded the bid, faced requests for change orders because suddenly they realize where these transformers are going to be placed. So we'll do a much, I won't say we didn't do a thorough job, but we're going to emphasize over and over, these are transformers to be placed inside a refinery.
I don't recall in the memo, I apologize if I'm asking a question that's already been answered. Are we going to revise our engineering estimate as well then?
Yes, it's likely we will.
Thank you.
So the action requested is to actually reject all bids.
Thank you, Steve. So I'll entertain a motion to reject all bids for the refinery substation equipment purchase.
I'll make a motion to reject all refinery substation equipment purchase bids.
And I'll
Is there-
second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 My motion carries, and let's move on to item 5E, Cherry Point infrastructure discussion.
Commissioners, I had sent a memo out to all of you a couple of weeks ago, I think almost 3 weeks ago, and about this topic. We had discussed this very briefly over, several times over the last few months. And this is really, the thought is that because of our involvement, our infrastructure at Cherry Point, both water infrastructure and electrical infrastructure, and the potential for new development as well as some projects related to existing refineries and other properties out there, we thought it would be appropriate for us to conduct a couple of different studies, really bringing those two studies together, but looking at water infrastructure and electrical energy infrastructure at Cherry Point, and trying to develop a 100,000 foot level, if that's the way you put it, look at potential development and redevelopment at Cherry Point, and how we can best prepare for not specific projects, but generally how we can best prepare to talk to potential developers and project proponents from existing customers out there, how we would approach such things as increasing energy supply to Cherry Point, how we would look at integrating or connecting, making new connections to BPA transmission grid, and how at that 100,000 foot level, what kind of assumptions should we take into consideration in terms of new infrastructure, substations, interties, those kind of things on the energy side, and then take another look at potential water supplied, not so much industrial, because we have right now, currently we really have sufficient pipe and pumping capacity to get an upgraded or increased domestic, I should say industrial supply there. But looking at the possibility of developing a potable treatment plant out at Cherry Point and how that could serve not only existing businesses, but new businesses, as well as possibly serving adjacent water associations on the potable side. And then look at also the potential for, the increased demand or potential new demand for broadband services out at Cherry Point. So we've had that discussion with folks at the Port of Bellingham and with the county executive's office about bringing the request for a portion of the funding to conduct those studies to the EDI board. And that was going to be my recommendation to you, the commission, that we develop an application to the EDI board for at least a portion of that funding. Just recently, in the last week or so, I've had a couple of meetings with the county executive's office and the Port of Bellingham folks about that. And as of this last week, the recommendation that's coming out of the county executive's office is not to go to the EDI board for that, but to do a joint quote request to the county council from the PUD, from the county executive's office in the Port of Bellingham to joint funding, so that right now the budget that we've gotten from our consultants to conduct those studies is just a little over $300,000 total. And that was water, potable water, and energy. If we add to that a consideration to look at potential sanitary services, sewer services at Cherry Point, we'd add another, I think about another $100,000 to that. But anyway, the county executive is suggesting that we look at approximately a $300,000 budget, and that the PUD would pay a third of that cost, the county would pay a third of that cost, and then through the Economic Development Fund, not the EDI fund, but the Economic Development Fund that the city of Bellingham and the county and the Port of Bellingham jointly fund, that they would come up with the other third, or approximately $100,000. And consideration as of last week in our discussion with the county executive's office, the county and Commissioner Deshmani is probably more aware of this than I am, but the county planning commission and the county council seem to be at a point in sometime in May to consider a new ordinance for regulatory compliance out at Cherry Point on new development and expansion of other refineries and other uses, and that could lead fairly quickly to a movement on potential developers to bring forward projects out at Cherry Point. And so I think the county executive is considering that this would be an appropriate time if the PUD was willing to share in the cost of doing this quote high level infrastructure analysis out there, that this would be great timing to bring this to the county council for their consideration for co-funding. So that's where I'll leave it. And I know that Commissioner Grant provided me with some comments about my email to you all on this subject. So I don't know if Commissioner Grant wanted to provide any comments at this time.
Yeah, I can share what I shared with you, Steve, and then I also am interested in hearing from Commissioner Deshmani because of I know how much you know about planning around Cherry Point, but just looking at the kind of very high level breakdown of costs and planning, I thought of an organization that I got connected with through the university that collaborated with BP on the carbon hackathon that we do every year. And this organization is called the Center for Sustainable Infrastructure. And they primarily work on kind of making industry cleaner. And they're working in about 8 communities right now around the state, Pasco, Spokane, a few, I don't have all of my notes here, but I talked with their executive director, Reese Roth, last week, a little bit about the work that they do. And so, they do planning work around with sort of industrial clusters. And they also do study missions to other countries that have done a lot of work on things like industrial symbiosis and to, like eco-industrial districts. I think actually some of our I believe Representative Sharon Shoemake did a study mission with the Center for Sustainable Infrastructure, along with someone from PSE and several others just a few years ago. So, you know, I guess I felt like, you know, it kind of felt like we'd already decided what consultants we were working with, but, you know, I guess I wanted to at least plant a seed to think a little bit about, you know, whether, even if it's a small portion of the budget, having a organization like that facilitate a conversation with different stakeholders about, you know, where we see Cherry Point going in terms of kind of clean energy and infrastructure would be worth doing. I don't know, though, if that's going to be rework that is already occurring with the Planning Commission. So with that, I yield the floor to my fellow commissioners to weigh in on this.
So I guess I'll take that opportunity to speak a little bit about the subject. There's a few things that come to mind on the subject of economic development and infrastructure in the Cherry Point area. And it's something we probably should discuss a lot more this year. But at the highest level, it's important to identify industrial activity that provides jobs and products for our evolving economy. And to some extent, the original proposal of the Cherry Point amendments that came from the County Council to the Planning Commission were about identifying things that we wanted to stop doing. And what the PUD has the opportunity, and certainly what we, in my role at the Planning Commission, has consistently been about what do we want to encourage doing. For example, counties have a hard time regulating throughput of facilities through land use code. So it was very problematic to try to regulate greenhouse gases by way of land use planning. So they're very excited to be able to propose and get adoption of those changes to the Cherry Point Amendment. So this is the background statement. It kind of explains a little bit about why we are where we're at and why hopefully that the flavor that the Planning Commission introduced into the Cherry Point Amendments retains towards final adoption by the County Council. Having said that, there's a lot of work necessary, and I really do embrace the idea of it being all the local governments working together to create an environment to really support high wage, hopefully industrial jobs in Cherry Point and throughout the county. And these elements of providing infrastructure are very important. Something that I also think is very important is recognizing how that is essential to attract small business. When a small business wants to go and establish facilities, they don't have the amount of planning horizon, time to go through the kind of permitting hoops that larger corporations do. Even larger corporations get tired, as was the case with the renewable diesel project. The more that local government, libertarian ideas have always been exciting to me, but they're completely unrealistic. If we want to help business and if we want to help small business, local government and national government and state government, I'm in local government. Local government has to do more to create that environment which allows business to have relatively low barriers to entry to get into operation. And infrastructure is key to doing that. And part of what is not explicitly mentioned in what you talked about, Steve, in your email, that I'd like to ask that we try to add is consideration of permitting obstacles, permitting hurdles. Not to obviate or to reduce permitting hurdles, but making those what is going to get permitted very transparent to the business that's coming to look for a home in Whatcom County to make products or to provide services, so that it's not confusing whether their project will get permitted when they are approaching potential landowners or service providers from the public sector. Another thing that is very important to me comes directly from my prior experience being an entrepreneur, being involved in several manufacturing efforts. And that is the importance of rail infrastructure. We have lots of nearly capable opportunities for rail in the county, but they're all largely problematic. Both the facilities that my prior company built were in Skagit County, because Skagit County made an effort to find the kind of facilities that I needed to manufacture products. I lived in Whatcom County then too. This Whatcom County was, and I looked at Cherry Point, and one of my staff people talked to the PUD back then. And it was a long pathway to get water. It was a long pathway to get the kind of rail infrastructure that we thought we'd need. So we have to do a lot in terms of supporting economic development in this county. And so that means it necessitates cross local government collaboration. I'm not sure keeping the economic development function completely within the port is the best long-term strategy for Whatcom County. The best example that I know of in my limited, albeit limited experience, is Skagit County. And a person to this day, I still very much remember fondly who embodied all of that. His name is Don Wick from Skagit County. And their economic development was a separate organization. It is and was the Economic Development Association of Skagit County. And they made magic happen for that county because they hustled on behalf of business to try to find the right match. And it's all about efficacy. It's not about ignoring regulatory requirements or other things. It's about spending the energy and the positivity to make that matchmaking happen in the community. So, and not from like a real estate agent perspective. It's not a real estate agent service. This is about really understanding all the complexities of what it takes to build a business. And that's not just finding a piece of property. That's permitting. That's infrastructure. So I really am delighted about the PUD's enthusiasm to be part of this process. I agree that it's a countywide effort. And I don't care how we get exactly how we get the funding to do it. But I really welcome the idea of it becoming more of a countywide, multi-local government process.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. I appreciate those comments, Commissioner. And I think that countywide, because of our authority to develop and manage, operate electrical infrastructure, is countywide. We have the same authority in terms of water resources to move water around, to assist other agencies, and in support of not just economic development, but I'll say it more broadly, in support of our economy, our local economy. But even more focused at Cherry Point, that my expectation is that there'll be few, if any, redevelopment or new development that happens at Cherry Point that will not involve or could not happen if the PUD wasn't involved in the electrical infrastructure and water infrastructure. The other is that because of the uniqueness of the location of Cherry Point as it relates to not just Cherry Point property owners, but adjacent water systems, adjacent light commercial and residential property ownership, and the relationship to the tribes in the basin in the county. We could play a very unique role out there. And I think that it's one thing as you know, Commissioner, you just brought up, you know, the looking at consideration of permitting barriers. I don't know that we can play, you know, a very specific role in that, but this is what my idea of getting ahead of looking at the integration of you know, electrical infrastructure for development and redevelopment out there. It's not about addressing an individual project or supporting an individual project or you know, stepping in and trying to, quote, as you say, and I'm not saying that's not a bad idea, but not trying to reduce those barriers for permitting, but the work that we can do now, looking at what the potential needs, opportunities for integration of, you know, electrical infrastructure specifically out there, that really opens the door to the county looking at what opportunities there may be for development, and public infrastructure ownership and investment by the public in infrastructure doesn't mean that you're reducing the cost of an individual developer to make their project happen, but it does really push those parties, and I'll say private developers, the county, the Port of Bellingham as an economic development, you know, agency in the county, and the PUD. It really gives the public a much broader say as to what kind of development can happen out there. And you know, the Commissioner Grant's, you know, comments about, you know, looking at sustainable infrastructure and how we could use our public infrastructure to leverage meeting of, you know, climate action goals and those kind of things. This is the way I think that this is one of the first steps that you can take to really build that leverage, having the public really, as you said, Commissioner Deshmani, you know, what is, you know, what does the public really want? And instead of stopping everything, this is an opportunity as a first step, along with the county, obviously, to say, okay, here's what we can get, you know, and it doesn't put the PUD in a position to say yes for that project or no for that project. But the key role that we will continue or can continue to play is holding that public infrastructure and making that public infrastructure work for the community. So.
Yeah, just to jump in again, Atul, thank you for all of that background. And I also, you know, really loved what you said about having it be more about what do we want rather than what do we want to stop doing, you know, figuring out what we want to encourage and how to remove obstacles to doing that. And so, you know, I think that this sort of brings me back to the question of looking back at your email, Steve, you know, is very sort of laid out like $120,000 for energy planning, $230,000 for water planning, roughly. To me, it felt, I guess I wonder if we should add or kind of think about budget for some of this community-wide planning around what our vision for Cherry Point is as a community. And, just kind of overall, how do we engage different stakeholders? For example, yesterday, Sue Gunn, who's a member of the Climate Impacts Advisory Committee, contacted me to talk about some of the work that they've been doing. And, how do we sort of integrate a lot of the different things that have been happening? And I think that realistically, to get that work done, we're going to need someone to facilitate the process. And I am in no means, I don't know if the Center for Sustainable Infrastructure is the right organization to do it. I know that they're doing similar processes in other communities around the state that have similar goals, which is why I brought it up. And, I guess I just would love to hear from, my other commissioners about whether, hearing a brief presentation from an organization like that about what they could do, kind of similar to how we've heard from NOAANET last time, would be helpful. Because to me, we're sort of missing that piece of how do we fund this convening and planning process.
Now, I'm just speaking for myself. I'm very supportive of that. I didn't get to say it because I got on my own horse, so I apologize. I'm very supportive of the idea of sustainable infrastructure. And in particular, when you were talking about it, I thought of the BP Cogen project. If there are aspects of that project that are still practical or viable, both providing both supplemental energy as well as thermal energy to an industrial park could be an opportunity. I guess that question would have to be raised with BP. But the thing is that I'm thinking about all the federal money coming and then thinking about shovel ready again.
Right.
And to the extent that if there's projects that have been engineered that have potential for getting federal funding, and creates low cost, best in class, let's say, pricing for thermal energy, is worth considering.
And I think that that's a great point that, I would much rather have shovel ready projects funded with federal grants that move some of these things forward than having a shiny, nice looking plan that, maybe takes, because planning just takes time. And so I think we need to sort of figure out how to right size the effort so we don't spend months and months and months planning and miss opportunities. But it also did feel like we need to coordinate with a lot of other groups on this, and coordination is just, it's hard. It takes time and you need some help doing it typically.
So I just noticed Lauren is on the call from P66. I wonder if we could reach out to BP and ask them about this subject of thermal energy and cogen. Steve.
Sure. No, that's absolutely. Here's a question, or not a question, but I think it was in. I might have the year wrong. I believe it was starting in 1998, and then the Port of Bellingham and the PUD actually joint funded a study, and I believe it was conducted by Deloitte and Touche. And what it did was it took a look at Cherry Point very specifically, and I was not at the PUD at the time. I was not at the port at the time. Actually, I was actually representing the small cities in that discussion. But I was very disappointed with the focus of the study and the outcome. My understanding of the purpose of that study was, at the time, was to take a look at Cherry Point and, from a community perspective, from an economic development perspective, what would be the most appropriate types of industry or development or new development or redevelopment at Cherry Point that would, again, saying most appropriate to consider in this corner of Northwest Washington, in this, in this part of the coast, considering what was available there for infrastructure, rail, natural gas, water, electricity, and so forth. The outcome of that discussion or that study, I was again quite disappointed because it was more, I think it was more of a site finder, kind of a report that said, okay, you should go after this kind of industry. You should go after this kind of industry. It did not lead into what I had hoped it would be, and that would be a community discussion that was led by, not directed, but that was led by the parties like the PUD, like PSEs, like the refineries, like the Port of Bellingham as lead economic development agency, but Whatcom County, especially because of its location outside of cities. It didn't go anywhere. And my thought is that based upon the limited discussion that I've had with the county executive's office over the last few weeks about, this study work and the alignment with where the county is right now, hopefully with the county council looking at amending, the ordinance for development regulations at Cherry Point. Is this an opportunity for those three parties to come together and look again at, back in the 1990s, there was such a thing as called a, economic development district or industrial development district that was actually in statute, provided for opportunities for funding, special planning opportunities, regulatory issues, those kind of things. And is this an opportunity now in a time for the county, the port, and the PUD to come together again? And as you said, commissioners, what does the community want out there? Not to direct the kind of or specific development on projects, but create this symbiotic relationship, more or less a planning and public infrastructure opportunity to go forward, and how to integrate the funding, the public funding and the public infrastructure ownership, and somewhat of some direction on public planning. How do we shape, what Cherry Point looks like in the next 20 years or 30 years, related to, our economic as well as environmental, climate impact issues that we're facing. So, and I'm, I was quite pleased with the county executive's, comments this last week saying, no, this is, he would be willing to not lead, but certainly support, this called triumvirate funding for this, these kind of studies, because it could lead to just that, that the parties can come together. And I think that all the issues that potential developers, whether it's a BP and, a potential solar project or another green apple project or, or some other type of development out at Cherry Point, I think that, that kind of joint effort could actually enhance the interest and support, by new projects. I don't know.
Mike, do you have anything to add?
Well, I'm very interested in what goes on Cherry Point. One of the things that was brought up by Steve was the potable water. I would really like us to be the future potable water provider for all development at Cherry Point. And who knows if that can't go beyond Cherry Point. But one of the things I heard at Energy Northwest was a company called PNL. It's called Pacific Northwest National Laboratory Energy Storage. And Vincent did his name was, gave an incredible report on battery storage. And I thought, why couldn't we, the PUD, get involved in something like that at Cherry Point, be a provider? It's incredible. I'll give a little update on it later on in the commissioners, but what they have accomplished, it just made me think of Cherry Point and us. So that would be what I'd add.
And part of that infrastructure.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Is there any more on the subject of Cherry Point infrastructure discussion? Anyone
Well,
else have anything else to contribute?
I mean, I guess it's more of like what happens next, what's the outcome of this conversation? And, you know, I guess I would be interested in whether, you know, it sounds like it would be a request to the county council, some PUD funding, and then, well, okay, I forget what the third bucket of money is that would fund some of this, but I guess I wonder if maybe we should go back to the county executive and say, you know, we had a conversation about this as a commission. We, you know, yes, this is about infrastructure, but it's also about hearing from the community so that when we have a business that wants to relocate here, there's buy-in from the community on it about, you know, the vision for where we're going with, you know, many different groups, including the tribes. And so, you know, maybe say, you know, yeah, we either need to add some budget or kind of change the budget for the energy and water infrastructure studies, so that we can bring, you know, a firm on that can help us with that. And again, I don't know who that would be. And if we want to hear from the Center for Sustainable Infrastructure, I'm happy to contact their executive director and ask if they can give like a 10-minute overview of what they do, just so we can learn more. But I want to make sure that we don't drop the ball on this and that we have kind of some clear action items for going forward. That's all I'm feeling.
But Steve,
My thought, commissioners, is that if you're okay with having me continue this discussion with the county executive's office, that I will relate, you know, your major comments today about it's more than just doing these two studies. And can this open the door for, you know, a public discussion with the county and with the port about just that, Commissioner Grant, is, you know, this, and I think this is where the county executive is coming from, is this just having this discussion around these kinds of studies, the funding by the county and the port and the PUD, it'll open the door to, you know, more about what those three agencies really want, how they want to approach, you know, the future of Cherry Point. I don't know if I'm saying that. So this is not just a get the funding, do these studies, then what? I think that this is potentially opening that door for, you know, that public discussion, especially at the county council level.
Okay.
so you're asking for a consensus from the commission to keep at it, and I think
Yes.
you have that.
Yeah.
And I would welcome a presentation from this Center for Sustainable Infrastructure.
Okay, and are we thinking like 10, how much time do we want to put on the agenda for that?
Maybe coordinate with Steve when economic development comes back on the agenda for the commission.
Okay, all right, I'd be happy to reach out to them.
Does that make sense, Commissioner Murphy? Is that something you'd be interested in too?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So Steve, I'll wait for you to let me know when you'd like me to reach out to them for a
Absolutely.
presentation. Okay.
And I think it'll be, you know, as a follow-up, as I have a follow-up discussion with the county executive's office and with the port about the next step, that I'll infuse in that discussion, the Center for Sustainable Infrastructure and talk about, maybe that's a presentation that, we'll invite the county and the port to also attend, so.
Yeah,
I would also, if I could add to that, I'd also like to hear from our customers out there too, what their future, what they're seeing too, because I'm hearing a lot of talk and sounds like they got a lot of things on their table, but we're not hearing about it. So maybe they could share some future with us.
Commissioner, would you like to potentially do that now? Or are you suggesting we ask them to address that in public comment, which is just a couple items down? How would you like to do that?
I was hoping to hear something from both of them, their representatives down the road in the future.
Okay,
Just an update of what they're planning too.
we're not
I think
putting
it's
them on the spot right now.
Yeah.
We
okay.
only have 4 participants, it looks like right now anyways.
Yeah, and I just didn't want to put Lauren on the spot because she's on the in the participants.
Just a thought too, that if we move ahead with, these call them studies on water and energy and infrastructure, we'll certainly invite the participation of our current customers out there at Cherry Point, because some of the things that are, especially on the energy side, that we need to get input from them, what's on their current quote, list of considerations for energy in and out of Cherry Point, connectivity and all that kind of a thing. So, and I'm hoping that this will also invite, potential developers that have been setting in the wings, if you would, waiting for some changes at the county, county council level, that this will invite them to come forward now and go, okay, we have the potential need for that kind of a thing. So.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more on this subject, Cherry Point infrastructure discussion?
Thank you.
So then let's move on then to the general manager report. Steve.
I just had just a couple of things. One is that, really all is the outcome of the legislature. And this is not inclusive at all about all the bills that that have passed and are waiting for the governor to sign that could impact us. But of course, 1336, the broadband bill, retail authority was passed, waiting for the governor to sign. 5383, which is the other broadband retail authority bill that has some limitations in it, that was also passed and is waiting for the governor to sign. Will it be interesting to see if the governor signs both of them? And then if he does, the rules that will be developed, to provide the implementation of those both at the same time, it'll be interesting. 1139, which was the tax increment financing bill, that was passed and is waiting for the governor to sign. That, I believe, depending upon how engaged the PUD, working with the port and working with the county in terms of countywide, but very specifically at Cherry Point, how that could impact infrastructure development by the public agencies at Cherry Point. I think that could be really critical. The other is that the capital budget, and I've had some discussion with Gina Stark at the port. She's monitoring or trying to put together a compilation of all the different funding parts of the capital budget for broadband. It looks, I just scanned through 1,100 pages last night of the budget and the capital budget, and it appears as though there's at least 4 different locations in that capital budget with up to about, I think, if I had it correctly, about $160 million of state money. And then there's some federal pass-through money that's been allocated through the capital budget. So we'll wait and see what that looks like. And then the operating budget for the Department of Ecology was part of the budget that was finally passed. And so there's funding in for the next 2 years for Department of Ecology to begin the preparation for the adjudication in the basin. I couldn't define it. I haven't had a discussion with the county executive's office after looking at that budget, but the way I interpreted it, it looks as though there's about 200,000 in that operating budget for Department of Ecology that was requested by the county executive to support his idea of local agreement. So, or settlement. So then, because there's a total of $1.3 million in for the Nooksack Basin, and the budget specifically does not call out how much of that is Department of Ecology preparation for adjudication and how much is for the county. But I believe the original request from the Department of Ecology was $1.1 million. So I'm assuming that 200,000 is the county. So I'm sure we'll be having in the next month or so a lot of discussion with the county and the county executive on where that funding will be allocated. And that's all I had.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions? Let's move on to item number 7, getting to know you. Thank you, Steve. Is there someone who's going to?
We don't have anyone today, Commissioner.
Okay. Great. So let's move on to commissioner reports. Commissioner Murphy?
Thank you, O'Toole. Just an update for the Commissioner Board that I did attend the Energy Northwest meetings, and as I started to tell you about the energy storage, I was quite interested in that. Looked at it as something we could do possibly here in Whatcom County. But one of the positive things I'd like to report, which I didn't really understand, is that the batteries in electrical vehicle are good for about 250 watt hours. This company is on their way to developing a 500 watt hour, which would make a big change in electrical vehicles. And right now in 21, they predict they'll be at 400 watt hours. So they're very close to achieving it, as well as all the storage, besides vehicle storage of energy and stuff. So it really was really positive listening to them. BPA's done some changes. John Hairston is leaving, and Joe Cook will be taking over the Chief Operation Officer's position, and a Susan Cooper will take Joe's position. So a few changes there, people that we don't really deal with all the time, but that'll be going on. Energy, X-Energy and Grant County and Energy Northwest is still moving on their study for the next level, what they can do in the future of the nuclear power plant. And also, O'Toole received a thank you for his service there too. So good job, O'Toole. Also attended the WPUD business meeting. I did send out through Steve to each of you the new president, vice president, secretary is. Getting to know you, we had our own Christine Grant there, giving a little tell about it. It was a great job, Christine. It was good to hear from you. And let's see. I'm going to say that's about it. There's a lot of talk, but it's just updates. And that was it for that, O'Toole.
Thank you. Commissioner Grant?
Yeah, so I did another WPUDA training with new commissioners. I think that's our last one. Hopefully there's not a test at the end. Then I did the next day the WPUDA Telecom and Energy Committee meetings, which I think Commissioner Deshmani was on those as well. I saw in the participants, but I wanted to just say one of the questions that I asked in the telecom committee was I mentioned our broadband hire and that we hadn't had very many applicants for it. And many other PUDs weighed in that recruitment is very hard right now for all the PUDs that are looking to do broadband hires. And so it really got me thinking a lot about recruitment. And as I showed you guys before, I'm reading this book right now about recruitment to kind of prepare for the general manager search, and learned that 77% of kind of key strategic hires are from personal or professional networks, so really just word of mouth. So I spent quite a bit of time on the phone kind of contacting key people about the broadband hire. I talked to Sabrina Roach, who's the program director for the National Digital Inclusion Program. I got the Institute for Local Self-Reliance to post the position on their job board, and also sent the job description to a number of different educational institutions that are working on this, like Joel Swisher with the Institute for Energy Studies, BTC, Skagit Valley College, and then just a bunch of people that I've worked with over the years in utilities. So I'm hoping that that is generating some interest in the positions. And I guess I want to sort of reiterate like how important recruitment is for our organization right now with these hires and the general manager. And so, you know, and just how important word of mouth is for getting these positions out. So, you know, we'll see if my efforts were helpful. And also Angela Bennick, who's the telecom director for KPUD, gave us some other suggestions and kind of got me integrated in some other professional groups that she's part of for broadband. So I also got a phone call from Ray Poorman, who owns CSS Systems, and I forwarded, he sent a follow-up email after our conversation, which I sent to Steve and I might send to the other commissioners, but he was kind of talking about all the funding for broadband. And I would say, to jump back to the WPUDA Telecommunications Committee meeting, shovel-ready projects is the name of the game. That's what all the PUDs are trying to figure out right now with broadband projects. And so Ray was letting me know about some projects that he has and some ideas he has about potentially partnering with the PUD. So we don't need to talk about that right now, but just wanted to mention it. And then you know, just kind of continuing to have some conversations and think about the sort of future of energy markets and the conversations we've been having with the Energy Authority, and you know, have been having some different conversations about that. But you know, I think overall, just waiting to see what happens with, you know, the governor has 20 days, right, to sign 1336. And just eager to see what happens there. So that's my report.
Great. So I wanted to just to briefly mention a few things. The first is that I'm really hopeful about our developing relationship with NOAANET. I believe, Steve, you've had subsequent conversations with them since our meeting with them. I also set up a meeting between NOAANET and Gina Stark at Port of Bellingham, and it sounds like that went really well too, because the port may have a lot more that falls into that shovel-ready category in terms of projects, so that could be helpful. And I think we're planning on having a NOAA proposal ready for our next commission meeting, which would be great. And I'm just very hopeful about that, that meeting. So the other topic is, you all, I've been saying that I've been exploring renewables projects that might be suitable for us in our region. And in addition to that, the Canyon Hydro subject, I've identified 2 different solar developers that are interested in Whatcom County. One of them, of course, is one that we've already been talking to in the capacity of Tucci Energy. Not only is the PUD interested in potential purchasing of energy that they're producing in Richland, Tucci Energies is also interested in developing a project here in Whatcom County. The port has an interest in that, and some of our industrial customers might have an interest in that as well. I've also identified a second firm, and I believe, Steve, I sent you an email about that, and we have to figure out what potential opportunities that exist around developing solar projects. But something that may be worth consider, at least floating those again in the category of recognizing that there may be a lot of funding available to do these kinds of things that wasn't previously available. So something to consider in that regard. And then lastly, I had a call with Maya Bellin, who is hired by the county executive to talk to various people in the community. And I believe Steve has had a conversation with Maya Bellin as well on the subject of how to move forward on water in a way that advances the goals of all the key stakeholders in the community, agriculture, tribes, and municipal purveyors and the public. And I was very heartened by the conversation. I'm excited about the idea of us moving right into the task of a Whatcom integrated basin plan. Nobody's coined that term yet, but basically learning from what happened in the Yakima adjudication and jumping straight to the punchline instead of waiting 20 years to do so. So I'm hopeful that we can do that in this community. We have a lot to be grateful for. We have tribes that are fully present in the conversation. I would argue that was a challenge in the Yakima Basin, and we don't have that issue here. Right from the beginning, they're engaged. We have a very active stakeholder process in the county. We have agriculture, which is amazingly united and collaborative in the form of the Ag Water Board, which also is somewhat unique. So we have a lot, and of course, the PUD's longstanding efforts and the facilitative position from the county and the city. I think fingers crossed, we if anybody can do collaboration well, I'm hoping it's this county, and that we can move right to the punchline. I repeat the point again, and do what we not have to bicker at each other and with each other to get there. Just go right there right away. So I'm hopeful about that, and I believe that that's kind of the flavor I'm getting from what is on Maya's mind too. So fingers crossed. That's my report. So with that, I believe if there's no further commissioner comments, reports, let's move on to public comment. Ann, can you assist?
Looks like right now we don't have any public comment. We had a comment from Rick earlier during emergency.
And,
subject.
and you're cutting in and out.
But one hand raised here. Sue,
Okay, I unmuted myself.
Sue Gunn has her hand
Yeah.
raised.
Yeah, I just like to comment. I was talking to Commissioner Grant yesterday, and I am on the Whatcom County Climate Impact Advisory Committee, and I was tasked to write the chapter up about industry. So it's the greenhouse gas emissions from our point source industries. And that really takes us down to the refineries, Alcoa, former polluter, and some of the peak power stations. And in the process of pulling this chapter together, I developed a bunch of recommendations. And many of them are focused at BP because 51% of our greenhouse gas emissions are from point source industries in Whatcom County. And BP is the greatest emitter. It's 5 times more emissions than Phillips 66. It's also the greatest emitter in the state of Washington. So I'm highly motivated to find recommendations to reduce their greenhouse gases. So one of my recommendations is for them to purchase energy from the PUD and get to cleaner, greener hydroelectricity. I did have a conversation with some of the members of the staff last week, and they were like, well, why should we do that? By 2045, PSC is going to have to be green. And in my mind, when you're that large of an emitter, the motivation is to do it as rapidly as possible as opposed to waiting to 2045. So I just want to tell you that I'm out here, I'm working on this project, I'm making recommendations that have impacts on PUD and possible supply, and available to talk about it further.
Thank you.
It looks like that's everyone.
Great. Well, that closes the public comment period. So if there's anything else for the good of the order, please speak up, commissioners. Otherwise, we'll move on to adjournment. Okay, well, thank you all for attending. This concludes the Whatcom County Public Utility District Commission meeting. Thank you all again, and let's adjourn.
Thank you.
Bye.